Hi. Thank you for being patient while I get here. I'd like to see myself bigger. Can everyone unmute really quick and just say hi to me and let me hear your voices, please?
Hey,
Hello.
Bo. Hello. Hey, Bo.
Hi. Oh, I'm so excited. Okay, thank you. I'm gathering myself. I wasn't ready for snow this morning, so I'm like, what's happening? Okay. Writing the past into the present. What does that mean? What's that all about? So, as a playwright, I'm a person who likes to dive into history, right? I love to see the inner workings of the past, be terrified by them, be inspired by them, and apply them to the history we're living in today. I love it. Last year, a year ago, I wrote a show called Red Summer, and that show was based on a real life incident that happened here in Omaha around the death of Will Brown, the lynching at the courthouse, if you remember. And in doing that show, I really opened myself up to new ways of researching and taking on a historical subject in a way that is still relevant to today, to not only educate, remind people that this happened, but also entertain them, which, you know, can lead to feeling some kind of way when you're talking about something as serious as a lynching, as devastating as this incident was, but you still have a need to entertain your audience. You know, it's this balance of being true to the story and also getting butts in seats, because at the time we were in live theater. And I think after COVID is over, that's going to be a necessity again, not only getting people in live theater, but also, you know, selling tickets. So that was when I really started thinking about what does this whole thing mean? Like bringing up this horrific piece of history, but bringing it back to life. So I'm going to use that as an example while we have our discussion today. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I want to show you guys on paper. So if you have paper, please get it out. Because I kind of came up with this inverted triangle idea thing that I'm working on. So I'd love to run it past you. And then throw me some questions in the chat. At the end, maybe the last 20 minutes or so, however long we have, we can open it up and just have conversations and talk to each other too. That would be great. We have an hour?
About 45.
45, okay, perfect. So, when discovering Will Brown, I grew up with this story. I knew about the occurrence because my grandfather, who raised me, he wasn't too far removed from it age-wise. And so we heard about it growing up. A lot of people in Omaha, especially other parts of Omaha, West Omaha, and the annexes, may have never heard the story, especially younger generations. And so in writing it, the interest around town really increased, including from educators who wanted to share the story with their young students. Okay, so there's another challenge, right? How do we not only bring the history in, but bring new audience members into the show, the story, and the theater? And Will isn't a person who kept journals. You know, we don't have his Facebook page to go back and check out what kind of person he is. So it's my job as a writer to make him real, make him more than just this tragic figure that we've all known, but to make him a fully fledged, full-bodied, warm-blooded human. And what does that look like? So in that research, I took what I knew from people at the time the way people walk, talk, dressed, the way Black people walk, talk, dressed. What brought Will here? It was this thing called the Great Migration. So he's up here looking for work. He doesn't have a lot of money. He doesn't have a lot of prospects. He doesn't have a lot of family. What do people who live in those tropes, how do they walk, talk, and act? While we were working on the show, I got one of the best pieces of advice from my dramaturg, who said I was giving my characters, these Black characters of mine in 1919 America, too much power in the way they speak, in the way they speak to white people. And she was like, you're giving them the words of liberation where they don't have liberation yet. I'm talking to them from a 2019 perspective, but they haven't had a Martin Luther King to give them that yet. They haven't had civil rights to give them that yet. They're at the midpoint of Jim Crow. And that really opened my eyes to the difference between what I want to give them because I love them, I want to give them power and liberation, and what I can actually give them, which is love and respect for where they are at the time, and be true to that. So that's just a little backstory about kind of where I write from when I'm writing historical pieces, being true to the time period, but also finding these small places where I can really let characters that were marginalized in these times find their freedom behind closed doors, find the freedom in who they love, how they speak in their own homes. And so that's part of it. Another part of writing the past into the present is I kind of discovered this, and this is what I want to try out within writing this process. So if you would take, you know what, let's do this first. If you have a piece that you're thinking of writing, and even if you don't, I'm gonna just ask you a few questions and just jot down your answers, and something may come to you, or it may be able to build into a piece that you've already been working on. I've been working with the kids at Burke High School around this piece also, and I asked them to do the same things, and they're just brilliant, brilliant minds. And yeah, I think this may be beneficial to any pieces that you're working on. So let's just take a second to clear your mind. Take a deep breath. I want you to think about people from your past, a grandparent, your mother, a cousin, someone you never met that you've heard their name mentioned. Just think about that person, write their name down, maybe the era they were born in. Silence your cell phones. Scott, I have a friend emailing you right now to come into the workshop. Think about where that person was born. What was the climate? Is it rural, city? What was happening in the political climate? Was it a big year? I used to feel adverse toward the phrase, write what you know, because I always thought it was so limited. But as I grew older, I realized it's the most freeing thing ever, because it gives you the freedom to look into yourself. It's not only write what you know. If you only know Nebraska, only write Nebraska. That's not the thing, right? It's, if you know about pain, write pain. If you've lived in abuse, free yourself through writing about abuse. If you have intense longing, write about that. And you can do that in any setting, in any time, with anybody. That's the point of writing what you know. I got that in a new way. Okay, so you have your notes there. That's just to set you in the right space to do this next exercise. So in this exercise, and you can use this in tandem with those notes you just made, make a triangle like this. So you have your big top here all the way down to this point. So at your top line, and I'm going to use Red Summer of 1919 for mine, but you can use any story for yours. You can use the notes that we just made, or just follow me and you'll figure it out as we go. So at my very top line here, this is the world at large, right? So this is the larger piece of what I called in this research process, the machine. My phone won't stop beeping at me. I'm so sorry if you can hear that. How do I make it stop? Okay. So in 1919, this bigger part here was World War II. It was soldiers coming home. It was the Great Migration. Really big stuff happening in that year. Try to do this for 2020. I mean, it's big. And that doesn't even represent just that year, but it's really that period, right? So then that's like the big machinery. So then the next level down, drawing another line. What are the implications of all of these big things? So that looks like, it looked like work shortages and money was tight. And it looked like racial tension in the North because there was an influx of Black people that had never been there before. It looked like the world was changing, right? So then the next line down is the geography of where these things are happening. So in this is really, it was like global, but for this exercise, it's US based. And what that would look like on yours is like, where are your characters? If this took place in Lithuania, then this would be specific to that. But my story takes place in the US, so this is where this part of my triangle sits. And then at the very bottom, this middle part right here can be used for extra notes. I'm still working out all the pieces of this triangle, but help me out when we get into discussions about it, if you have ideas. But this little piece right here, tiny little point, that's Will. That's Will Brown. This is his story. And that represents how all of these other pieces affect just one person. This is the macro, the machine, and then this is how it makes people act. And then at the very bottom here is the one person who all of these other things have affected, with or without him knowing it, in a way that he doesn't survive. And I feel like you can do this with any story at any time. While I was writing this story, this was in the middle, and I'm not going to get political. All I'm just going to do is say facts. So this was the same time that the border wall was going up. And so I was looking at it at a way that we have the top line being an administration who wants this border wall up. And then the second line is people who are either for or against. And what's that making us do? It's making us fight. It's making us angry. It's making people push money for donations. It's creating division. It's US and Mexico based, so it's international. And then at the very bottom is this little girl who goes home one night and her parents aren't there anymore. And that's the story that we don't see on the news. That's the story. And we may see a snippet of her in tears, but we don't go home with that little girl at night and feed her or make sure she's fed. And that's the story that I want to tell. And that's the story that is going to bridge the gap of humanity from this big historical thing that seems overwhelming to this little piece of humanity that can get through to you in 2020 because you can see yourself in that little girl or in that scared man from 100 years ago. Okay, any questions? Awesome. Does anyone want to share anything about a person in history, be them real or in your life, that you're interested in writing about? Is there anyone like that? Okay, cool. So we can move on to this next part of this exercise, which is gonna be some independent writing time. So I would love for you to take that person that I asked you to choose and then take that time period and put yourself in the scene also. I want you to meet your person in your year and see what happens. And I do want to hear some shares after this. So let's just write for 5 minutes or so and just see what comes up. And then maybe while you're writing, I might throw a couple of prompts out to have you throw in to your piece. So it's 1:20, let's go till 1:26 because the time's about to change, and just write.
Hi, Bo. It's Kim. Can you repeat what we're writing about again?
I'm muted. Hi, yes. Okay, Miss Kim, if you could pick someone from your past, anyone, whether you knew them or not, and then, but someone who you are related to or someone that fascinates you. And then choose a place, rural, city, whatever. And in the era of their life, whenever they were around, if you could write for 5 minutes on that person in that place at that time and insert yourself into the scene.
Thank you.
Thank you. One more minute. Something I find fascinating about writing in history is the power structures, the power dynamics, and thinking about what it would be like to be a woman in the past. I mean, women couldn't have credit cards in their name until 1972. You know, that's so wild to me to think about. What it would be like to be a Black woman in the past, what it would be like to be a mother in the past, you know. When I was working with the high school students this past week, uh, one of them said, she said, I would never want to be in the past because I've thought about it and I wouldn't have any power and they would probably kill me. And I was like, all of that could be true. Like, yes, maybe so. But also, you do exist in the past. There were millions of people like you in the past who, with or without power, still existed. And especially when you're in a marginalized community, the strength and the power of those people that came before us are the reasons why we can even be here today. So I always encourage people, especially people in marginalized communities, like, don't just hand your power over when writing in the past, because it doesn't look like it does today, because there were people that fought back and people that had power and were powerful. And I think it's so important to remember, to hold on to those stories. And there were so many stories. Oh, I got them. Those are my girlfriends. Um, and there were so many stories that have been hidden in our history that do exemplify the strength and power of marginalized communities in the past that are there for us to uncover, that you would never know about. So when we're thinking about writing from our perspective of who we are today, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, don't be discouraged because you would have just been this or only could have done that, because there's still worlds of power inside of our history for you to discover. So if you're just coming in, we're talking about writing from the past. We're looking at people that we have been related to, who inspire us or fascinate us, and then putting ourselves back there in that history with them within scenes. So is there anyone who just wrote that would like to share a piece, just a snippet, or even just like who you wrote about and what you discovered, what you noticed, what you wonder? And if you don't, I'm gonna call your name and hope that you share. Miss Kim, you have something?
Yes, I do. So I actually wrote about a neighbor that I lived next to when I was a kid, and she was old then. So I'm imagining she was born in the 1800s,
Yes,
maybe in the country, worked as a sharecropper, possibly.
yes,
So I just wrote, the sun is warm today, not hot or skin scarring. Wheat bends to the will of the wind. It is harvest time. Every back is stooped. I follow, and I don't remember her first name. So I say, I follow Mrs. Smith, a young girl of 8, practiced already at the pulling against the land to free the roots of planted things. She works at a steady pace, neither fast nor slow, but continuing as part of an ancient cycle of uprooting the growing, the alive, the life in the earth. The dust of her work hits against my face and carries grit into my mouth. I turn away from the sun, saddened by the light.
That's Miss Kim Louise. Oh, I love you. You know what I love? I love
I love you, Bo.
I love you, Kim. I love a young girl of 8 because thinking about the way we remember things with our child's brain, how they're so much bigger than they would be with our adult brain, how that neighbor of yours was just so much bigger than life in a way that here we are years later and she's the person that pops into your head. We had a babysitter named Ella when I was a kid. My cousins and I all went to her. And I don't know how it happens, but one of us, like we hated Ella, like we hated her. And one of us cousins told a story one time, and then the story just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Till the next thing we know, we had told our mothers and aunts that there were children levitating in Ella's kitchen and that she had a dungeon downstairs where she kept babies and she put the pacifiers in the oven. Like, we told them this, and we are still telling these stories today. Like, we're still like, I am convinced these kids were levitating in her kitchen. And it just becomes part of your family lore, right? It just becomes part of the stories that you tell. And it's beautiful. And I love thinking about, this is your perspective of this woman, and what was her life like? What's her perspective of you? Like, why is this 8-year-old child going past my house again, looking at me, or whatever. So I love that. Anyone else? I would love to hear another. Or any questions too. Miss Heidi?
Okay, make me go after Kim. That's all right.
You had your chance, Miss Heidi. You could have jumped in.
All right, so I chose my grandfather, who was born in Sweden in 1908. So I was busy looking up history while you were talking, but apparently there was a big election in 1908. So
is that, oh my goodness, what's his name? I was gonna say, one of the presidents. Teddy Rose, is that the Roosevelt election?
well, actually, I went off of the edge and wrote about it as if it were happening in Sweden, even though I know you said not to.
No, but you know what I say doesn't matter. At the end of the day, all I'm doing is giving you ideas, and then you do what you have to do.
Okay, he was tall and skinny with a shock of white hair, for he was both young and old at the same time. He told me the free-minded National Association has swept the election, just as if it were normal to be telling his granddaughter, born 52 years later. He looked slightly baffled, but continued, "We have been fighting for this election for so long. The president is a lunatic."
Okay,
That's
yes.
it.
Oh, I love, okay, so your grandfather was born in 1908?
He was.
And he was born here, but this election takes place in Sweden?
No, I think he was born in Sweden.
Very cool, very cool. And the election, was that a presidential election in Sweden?
It was. I think there it's actually a queen or a king or something. I'm not positive, but I love the name. It was the Free-Minded National Association Party.
Free-Minded National. I'm going to tell you, if that was the name of a group in America, I'd be terrified. I don't think we would
True.
mean what we would think it would mean.
Have a little different than it was over there. Yes.
Yes, 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 yes. Um, Grandparents are so important. I was raised by my grandparents. My grandmother is still alive. And my mother, I was raised by, my mother also raised me, but I was raised by my grandparents. And I named my middle child after my great grandfather. And the memories that you keep from them, it just becomes this thing where it's embedded in your DNA. It is a part of who you are forever. If you, um, if you have a strong relationship, a healthy relationship with them, I think, or you know what, and probably even an unhealthy relationship. I had this thing, I had this dream years ago that I had my grandmother's eyes. And I inherited her eyes. And when I inherited her eyes, I also inherited all of her memories. So I saw my mother being born in this dream. And my grandmother had my mother when she was 14 years old. And what that dream did to me, it shook me for a really long time afterward. I ended up writing about it in multiple different places. If you read or watch some of my work, you'll probably hear it mentioned, a couple of times, but I don't know, it's something magical. And then this thought too, that my daughter was in my mother when my mother was pregnant with me. I just found out that little piece of science, and that has just given me this whole new view of how we come home to each other when we write about our grandparents and the ones that came before us. So let's keep writing. Let's take another 4 or 5 minute section, and I just want you to write down 4. I'm going off the top of my head. I have my notes here, but give me a historical event that has always fascinated you. Like 1 or 2, and I want to share these, but what's something that you've always wanted to dig more into, or something that you've just learned about that you're like, whoa, I have to know more. And I want you to place yourself inside of that historical event, knowing all that you know from 2020, and think about what your place in the world would be, your identity, whether you're marginalized or not. What power would you have? And you can do a monologue, you can do a dialogue with another person. Who is in power? How does this connect to your modern life? Don't think too much about it. Historical event, and you're there. What do you do? What do you say? Let's do, oh my gosh, our time is going so fast. Let's do 4 minutes on that and then come back and chit chat. Let's do 30 more seconds and then come talk to me. Okay. Okay, we only have a few minutes and I want to hear what your historical event was and why. And I think that's all we have time for, but I really want to hear your event. I will start. My event is finding out that not only is pineapple not Hawaiian, but it was the Dole Corporation that went to Hawaii and helped overthrow the queen and then plant pineapple in Hawaii and essentially coerce that native land into becoming part of America. It blew my mind. I'm obsessed with this story. I have never looked at pineapple the same way again since I found out just a couple of months ago. And I just want to know more about it. So that's where I wrote from. Scott, were you writing?
I was not.
Scott wasn't writing. Okay, Christina? Will you please tell me your historical event and why?
I currently live in Belgium. So I recently got to go to Ghent and I saw the altarpiece that was painted there from Jan van Eyck.
Ooh.
And I have to admit, I was just looking at the piece. I didn't pay attention at the year and I just looked it up now and it was painted in 1432. So I was just thinking, what a cool time to have it painted and still today. People are looking at it, coming from all over the world looking at it.
Oh, I love it. Can you, Christina, do you mind throwing in the chat what you said?
Yes, I will.
Thank you so much. Heidi, what did you pick?
You know, my mind kind of went blank when you said history. And then all of a sudden I remembered this movie me and my mom had watched a couple months ago, and it was about the coronation of the Queen of England. So that's what I wrote about.
Oh, I love. If you are a history buff, you have to listen to Noble Blood podcast. It is all about aristocracies from like their hidden stories, all their scandals from all over the world. Half an hour, juicy, delicious, accurate.
Awesome, thank you.
Miss Kim, what was yours?
So I have always wondered what happened when the last plantation in Texas got the news that slavery had ended. Because it took 2 years for everybody to find out. So I've always wondered that very last plantation that got the news. What was that like?
You know what? I love that. And without research, we could just make that up for ourselves. The next show that I'm working on is a musical, and it takes place starting on Juneteenth. And when she finds out the news, she murders her master and his wife. I don't think that's what happened, but that's what my play says. Mary, did you write something?
I did. I finally watched Hocus Pocus, so I was thinking about witches.
Yes.
And so I wrote about the Salem witch trials and thinking about like the mental illness in my family history, how that would have just been like easily pinned on everybody in my family.
Mary, last night, were you able to watch the shows from Joslyn Castle? I will get you the link because the show I wrote, we have a whole section about the Salem witch trials and mental illness.
Oh, cool.
And you and me both, sister, would be on the stake.
Yeah, no, we'd be on the stake.
I love Salem. I went there a few years ago and I loved it. I love those stories. Who else is on my list? Susan, did you write? Hi. Yes.
Maybe turn your volume down.
Oh,
So we have just about 2 minutes.
we've got 2 minutes. Okay.
I wrote about Seneca Falls and the women, like the first women's conference that was there. And I was just thinking about how they would have been received, what the men would have thought of this huge gathering of women in the 19th century, and what kind of how that feedback would be from them with all the protests and things that are happening today. Would there be violence against them, or those kinds of things?
I love that so much. We have one. Valerie, can I hear yours?
Oh, I wrote about Victorian England and kind of the juxtaposition of how the Industrial Revolution was just starting and the introduction of all this technology, so to speak, and yet they remained trapped, and the powers that be tried to hold on to that power through any way that they could, be it manners or just keeping people into that class structure.
Yes. Okay, our time is up, but I love these, and I just want you to think my parting words are remembering this diagram, this triangle, because if up here, the thing that we have is the Salem witch trials, and right here is how that makes people behave, then right here is Goody Proctor getting murdered for it. That's the way this triangle works, and that's the way we should be approaching our stories to keep them relevant to today, since we're always at the very bottom of this giant political, socio-economical structure. Okay, thank you. Bye.